Good morning. My name is Larry Jacobs. I am a professor at the University of Minnesota, and I also direct the Center for the Study of Politics and Governance at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And I want to welcome you to the third annual Certificate in Election Administration Conference, preparing for the 2024 elections. Before we get started with the conference, I want to just give you a few words about the Certificate in Election Administration, or for short, CEA. CEA is a pioneering online academic program that provides comprehensive training in election administration at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Our mission is to expand professional expertise in the field of election administration and to prepare the next generation of election administrators by building a pipeline of new talent into the field. We welcome current election officials who are eager for professional development, and we are creating learning opportunities for those who are new to the field. The students in the program gain knowledge about the best practices in the field, and they also come to develop skill sets that are critical for navigating the challenges and the opportunities in election administration today. We're also pleased to provide free educational events like today's conference that brings together experienced election officials and policymakers to explore current issues facing election administrators. Now, just a couple quick things here before we get started, which is momentarily. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. That's your opportunity to participate. Just click it, give us questions. Please give us questions. We welcome that. It's a great way to make this experience interactive. And also the questions you raise are often questions that other folks are thinking about. If you'd like to have live captioning, that is also available. You'll see at the bottom of your screen. Again, welcome to the third annual Certificate in Election Administration Conference, preparing for the 2024 elections. We're delighted to bring you a series of panels that will explore actionable, practical information for election administrators that can be applied to the upcoming 2024 elections. I want to talk about three different panels. We're going to start off hearing from a panel of local election officials about strategies and programs they have enacted with minimal or no funding to increase access, turnout, and voter education in their jurisdictions. Then we're going to hear from a NFL analyst and consultant, Scott Pioli, and Harvard Ash Center's Tova Wang, about an innovative program they created to use sports stadiums as polling places. Very much looking forward to that. And lastly, we have a terrific panel of federal policymakers that are going to give us the lay of the land about funding and support that is available for the upcoming elections. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Judd Choate. Judd is Director of Elections for Colorado, and he's an instrumental part of the CEA program as a faculty member, chair of our advisory board, and organizer of this program. Thank you very much, Judd.
I am joining by my phone because, of course, it's election season, so why not have a major technology issue, but we'll get through it. So I'm really excited by this panel, and then we have two others later today. This one in particular is about trying to find inexpensive and relatively straightforward ways to improve your elections kind of at the last minute, things you can do in the several weeks prior to an election or months prior to an election that don't require a statutory change and don't require significant amounts of money or personnel. And there's variations to that, but basically these are things that you can do without getting a ton of approval from bosses or from the legislature. and then also, not writing a big check. So that was sort of the design around this particular panel. And I'm really excited that we have three panelists that can really walk us through some ideas. The first is Mesa Sitar, who is the jail voting specialist at the Denver election office here in Denver, Colorado. I am also in Denver, Colorado. And she's going to walk us through one of the sort of growing areas of interest in elections administration, and that is how do we get to and involve people who are currently confined but are otherwise eligible, which for the vast majority of people who are confined, that's the case. So let me turn it over to Mesa so that she can walk you through her presentation. And hopefully in that 8 to 10 minutes, I can join you by the actual webinar. So Mesa, why don't I hand it to you?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mesa. I'm the Voter Accessibility Administrator for the Denver Election Division. I'm going to talk today about jail-based voting. I'll talk a little bit about why it's difficult to vote from jail, what our process in Denver looks like now, and then what some easy, free things that you can do if you're interested in implementing this program on your end. So first and foremost, why is it difficult to vote from jail? There are quite a few challenges. There's pretty slow mail access in jail. So the USPS, all mail is required to be screened coming in and out. And so that delays ballots significantly. Voters also don't have internet access in jail. They don't have access to email. They frequently have to pay if they want to use their phone, if they want to make a call. They often have limited access to forms of identification, which are required for voting typically. All of these above reasons make it very hard to cure their absentee ballots if they're able to get one. They have limited information access, so it's difficult to know when an election is and then who's on the ballot and how they would like to vote. And then one of the biggest challenges is that they're unsure of their eligibility, and many are afraid of further prosecution if they register to vote or vote and they're not allowed to. So I want to touch on some of the data we've gathered to kind of answer the question, are there actually people that are being disenfranchised? Are there people in jail who want to vote and are unable to? So on our end, in 2023, we had 187 people who voted at our in-person events. We found that 77% of them were either new voters or needed updates to their record. That trend continued in 2024 with about 85% of our voters being either new voters or needing updates to their record. And this indicated to us that there were voters in jail who wanted to vote and were unable to vote otherwise. These are voters who would not have been able to receive a ballot, who would not have been able to vote had we not gone in those first few days, in that first week before the election to provide them ballots. So it was clear that in Denver County, this issue was apparent, and that's why we created a process to conduct in-person voting in the jails. So a little background on the program. It began in 2016, spearheaded by an NGO in Colorado called Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. Our jail-based in-person voting began in November 2020. It was paused for COVID and then restarted in 2023, and we continue it this year as well. We have voter registration events held monthly. And then just this last month, Colorado Senate Bill 72 was passed, which mandates in-person voting for every jail in the state. And so we'll see that happening in November 2024. And the process that I'm going to outline for you today is the process that is outlined in the bill. So if you're interested in that, I would really recommend taking a look at that bill. So I'll cover the processes and challenges. Just to reiterate that there are a lot of people in jail who are pretrial or who have a misdemeanor. In most states, you can vote with a misdemeanor while in jail. There's just a few that you can't. And in all states, you can vote if you're pretrial because you haven't been convicted yet. There's a really high number of people who are pretrial, and about 60% of them are actually unable to leave jail because they can't pay bail. So our process, our voter registration events, to give you an idea, take about 2 to 4 hours per facility. We usually send 2 to 3 poll workers, and there's about 1 jail administrator. Our in-person voting events last 5 to 12 hours per facility. So that really depends on how long the ballots are. Denver tends to have very long ballots, so it certainly goes a lot faster if you only have a one-page ballot. It depends on voting method, jail population size, and we just add a staff member to that to make it go a little bit faster. Our voting process, we first have the voter go through an eligibility zone, make sure that they're eligible at the time of voting, and then we split them into in-county voters or out-of-county voters. Out-of-county voters, we provide a statewide ballot, which allows them to just vote on the statewide races. And we also provide all of our voters the option to, we provide them a mail ballot. So they have the option to vote it right then, or they have the option to take it with them and think about it a little longer. That decision was made because we had about half of our voters who were interested in voting their mail ballot later on. Many of them still returned their mail ballot. We provided them an easy way to do so, but they were very interested in the choice to take some more time to think about their vote. So despite providing mail ballots, one of the biggest benefits to in-person interactions is that real-time eligibility check. Voters are able to vote at a time that they know they are eligible. Eligibility changes very rapidly for people in jail. So it's important that they are aware of their ability to vote at the time that they're voting. We also found way fewer voter registration form errors. You're able to talk to those voters one-on-one. Pre-challenge voters can provide documentation like IDs or a signature if they don't have one on file. And then of course, we're able to answer questions for those voters and establish trust with that population. So these are some of the challenges that we have encountered, and that if you do a program like this in your state, you may encounter as well. I'll cover some of the solutions. For that eligibility, we did a real-time eligibility check. Every state has a Department of Corrections database, and it's often public record. And we were able to check the voters' eligibility at that moment. Acceptable IDs, Colorado law allows for a confined voter-specific ID, but it's pretty easy to work with your sheriff to develop an ID that works for those voters and that they're able to have. There's also a high number of out-of-county and unhoused voters. So we used that statewide ballot and then worked within the confines of the law and with the voters to identify a residence for them. A question you'll likely have to answer if you do a program like this is whether the jail can be used as a voting location or precinct. And then some of the biggest challenges we encountered are jail policies and procedures. Voters often can't move from floor to floor. There's typically required separation between inmates. There are a lot of time constraints and equipment constraints. And so all of those need to be problem solved. We made our VSPC, our voting site, very mobile so that we could move from floor to floor. We tend to bring in voters by pod. We want to get all of our voting equipment approved ahead of time. So those are just some practical solutions that made it a lot easier for us to implement this. And then, of course, voters have limited information access. And I'll talk a little bit about providing a toll-free election phone number in a bit. So another important consideration for us was selecting the right poll workers. We tend to draw from volunteer organization staff. They're often already cleared to go in the jail, and they often already work with these populations, so they're great people to work with. And then we pulled from some of our more experienced poll workers, and we did so well in advance that we can make sure that they are cleared in time to get into the jail facilities. I'll touch very briefly on safety and security. I just want to say that since 2016, we have had 0 safety incidents at any of our voter registration events or in-person events. This is a concern that I hear very frequently from people. And I like to say that I personally feel pretty safe because I know that everyone has been checked for weapons. I know that everyone is incentivized to be on their best behavior. And so I actually feel safer there than I feel sometimes in the general public. And then the last thing I'll touch on is just that this is a widely applicable program, regardless of what state you live in, regardless of what your state laws are. So if you do live in a state that allows mail-in or absentee voting, we found that it's very helpful to deliver mail ballots early and directly to the jail to avoid those USPS delays. We also found that it was very helpful to provide a sample voter registration form to avoid a lot of those time-consuming mistakes that you have to interact back and forth with the voter via USPS. And we typically encourage the voters to update their mailing or absentee address to the jail during election time if they're going to be in the jail at that time. For in-person events, if you're an in-person only state, or if you would be interested in conducting in-person voting in your jail, what few ways to make it a little bit more efficient is just providing those sample ballots and any informational booklets you're able to provide a few days in advance or to voters in line so that they know who they want to vote for when they get to the front. Asking them to complete their registration forms, have their ID documentation ready, or working with the sheriff's department to make sure that that documentation is going to go quickly and smoothly in advance. And then just determining what IDs are going to be acceptable and available for voters in the jail ahead of time. And then a few other things that you can do now for free are reach out to NGOs already working in the jail. This creates a greater work distribution. Typically these NGOs are already cleared and they already work with these populations. So they're well trained in how they need to interact with a vulnerable population. Also establishing a relationship ahead of time with your local jail sheriff's department. We found that time really builds trust. Sometimes the sheriff department and the local NGOs don't have the best relationship, but as a fellow governmental agency, you can form a relationship that is a little bit easier to work with. It's also very helpful to request an election division phone number be made toll-free for inmates. This is something that we found was free and easy and quick, and the sheriff's department had no problem doing. It just makes it easier for them to be able to call you and ask about their ballot, ask about their voter registration. It's kind of something you can do at the very bare minimum. An NGO also created a quick eligibility checklist for voters. This was super helpful because voters can kind of come and already be able to apply their situation to the eligibility without you having to explain it over and over again to each person. And then the biggest thing that we found is helpful is just asking voters in jail what they need. For those of us who have not been in jail, it can be hard to predict what it looks like in there, what they're actually able to access. Everyone's situation is different and every jail is different. And so asking voters in jail what the voting process looks like for them right now is a really great place to start. And then this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about this more or share any information that would be helpful.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mesa. That was really informative. And I just as a note in Colorado, I think we have one of the more sort of progressive programs already prior to this law, and we were still seeing incredibly low turnout numbers from that population. So even if you sort of think to yourself, well, we have a state that's sort of conducive to this population, or we can sort of jerry rig what we've got to sort of boost those numbers. That's just really not the case. You need something special, dedicated, and what Mesa just walked you through is basically how you do that. So fantastic. Thank you very much, Mesa. As you can see, I am on video now. However, I switched to my personal computer, which I should have done about a half an hour ago. So that's my fail. Let's move to Tommy Gong. So Tommy joins us. I think actually he joins us from New York State today, but he's from California. And Tommy's going to talk to us about working together with colleagues across a region or state to come up with ways to tackle mis and disinformation about election processes. So let me hand it over to Tommy.
Great. Thanks a lot, Judd. Again, my name is Tommy Gong, and I am the Deputy County Clerk Recorder for Contra Costa County in the San Francisco Bay Area. Let me go ahead and share my Okay, so real quickly, when I've been in 3 different counties over the years, And one of the things I was in a Central Coast county, and it was much more isolated. I think I shared one media source with a neighboring county. And so when I landed in the Bay Area in Contra Costa, I realized that there are many, many different news stations and newspapers that cover the gamut of the Bay Area, whether it's as far north as Napa, as far south as Santa Cruz, and as far east as Contra Costa, that we all share the same media market. So I thought maybe there's a way that we can work together, especially after the 2020 election, with the mis and disinformation that we were all dealing with. And so we proposed forming this coalition of Bay Area election officials. All collectively, we represent over 4.3 million voters in our Bay Area. And our mission is to collaborate, communicate, and provide accurate, current, and transparent elections information in our shared media market across the Bay Area. You can see all of the counties below that have participated. And in this way, we're really working together. And so some of the things that we did was we created fact sheets that cover such things as vote by mail voting, the voting system, and the canvas. And one of the things we learned is we really want to be able to simplify the message for the voter. So you can see some of the things to the right on our fact sheet for the official canvas. Instead of all of the different requirements that we're required to do during the canvas, we distilled it down to 4 critical tasks: count every eligible ballot, ensure voters only voted once, confirm proper procedures were followed, and verify the voting system is properly counting ballots. Next to that, just towards the center, you can see these infographics that were created. Now, these are rather recently. I should share that the coalition was started in 2022 at the beginning of the year, so that we've had a few years to be able to mature this group of our counties. And so after our 22 cycle in 2023, I asked Jennifer Morrell of the election group to do a facilitation between the 11 counties to say, this is what we accomplished in 2022. What do we want to do for 2024? And so some of the items that were created was, what are the themes that we believe we receive from our voters that express concern about our election process, such as, how do I know my vote was counted? And why does it take so long to count the votes? And so we created these infographics with the election group help. The election group, by the way, provides services free of charge to counties. And so again, that's just one more benefit of things that we discovered as we were creating this coalition. And lastly, I'd just like to share that the coalition was the winner of the 2022 Democracy Award with the Election Center. Very proud to have received that. So the next is, and this is something that goes beyond it, the beginning of 2024, we were asked by the Stanford D School, the design school at Stanford, if we would be willing to collaborate with them during a winter quarter course called Designing for Democracy. And we would work with the students in some way, shape, or form. And so we did 2 sprints, they call it design sprints. And one was, you can see in the middle of the screen here, are election security safeguards. This is something we put together in 2022. Very rapidly we did, and we did it with the help with CISA and other folks. And so there are 48 different safeguards there, and who is going to read all of those 48 safeguards? And so we wanted, our first request was for the students to reimagine this poster and find a way that we could communicate with the public very quickly about what are the things that they need to understand about the elections. And so below, you can see these 3 posters that the students created that we're considering utilizing for the November election collectively. Again, we figured that having a unified voice, communicating with the media, that we can actually get a bigger bang for our buck if we're always delivering the same message as our neighboring county is. And so with the help of UC San Diego and the MIT Election Data Lab and the Election Trust Initiative, we're going to be testing these 3 posters with public opinion polls throughout the greater Bay Area. And the image that tests the highest will be the one that we would be utilized for a unified campaign by all of our counties during the November election. And then the second design sprint was it was more open for the students to consider how might we increase public trust in elections. And so here are some of the things that they considered. One is, and we're very excited about, a first-time voter mail package as a rite of passage, like welcoming pre-registered students who are 16 or 17 in California and welcoming them as being a future voter. And so that's something we're really excited about in terms of creating those packages, and whether it's something that's actually physical or or electronic. Also, to the bottom left, we were very excited to see that reimagining a graphic of a young lady from our old Uncle Sam, I want you to recruit you to be to be recruited into the Army, that we want you to become an election observer or even a voter. And it was really intriguing to hear it from the student, what they did in order to soften the look, right? As a younger person, that we think that this is a way that we can engage our students and our future voters into the process. So I just want to share that how can someone get this all done in such a short period of time? And I'll just share that this is really something that has grown over a couple years. And what I recommend now to counties is to talk to your neighbors, your neighboring county election office, in case you haven't done so already. Find opportunities where you can share the same messaging. You can even develop stronger messaging between you and your neighboring counties. But find these opportunities, because I think you're going to find that there's much more in common that we have than we have that is different, and that we're going to just feel stronger being able to deliver that message to the public in terms of trust in elections. We recognize that the public knows very little about what we do in elections, so it's upon us to educate the public about what we do, because if we're not providing that information, then they can really be victimized to the mis and disinformation out there. And so I just want to leave you with that message. I think there's still less than 6 months away from our November election. And I think during the summer, I think there can be some strong alliances between neighboring counties to work together. So I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tommy. So I don't want to jump into questions, but I'm curious, did you have a winner? So you had the 3 options. Did you come up with a winner, and is that known yet?
It is not known yet. We're going to be doing this testing in June. It can be done fairly quickly with our college researchers. And so that's what we're really planning to do in that way. I will say that as far as the election officials are concerned, the iceberg seems to really be the one that really resonated with election officials, in that, beneath the surface elections, voting is only the tip of the iceberg. And so we're trying to find a way that maybe that's the way that we can communicate with the public to find out more. Then they can click on the link and find out more information about elections as they need to. And so that is just, I know that's something that's resonating in us, but we're going to need to do the testing and really see what data provides to us in advising us what image is the strongest.
Yeah, and it may be that the thing that works the best for you doesn't work for the public. So but I like the iceberg as well. First of all, it's very visually pleasing, and then obviously symbolic of the work that we do.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Tommy. Appreciate it. Now I'm going to jump to Michael Seacrest, who is joining us from Michigan. And he's going to talk to us about, I sort of approached Michael and said, hey, Michael, I really love the way you use social media to kind of get the word out on the various things that are happening in Canton elections. And I wanted to know if that's something maybe that can be a model for other jurisdictions. So, Michael, can you tell us about your program?
Yes, most definitely. Thank you, Judd. It's an honor to be here. As Judd indicated, I'm Michael Segrist. I'm the clerk in Canton Township, and I'm going to get my presentation up and ready to go. Let me get it in presenting mode. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. All right.
So you're in presentation mode, but if you have a second screen, if you could shift to the second screen, then
Let me try that. I have 3 monitors, so
yeah, it's funny. You would think multiple monitors would help you in these circumstances, but they actually hurt you because you end up showing the wrong monitor. I've done this like a million times. There you go.
better?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So our presentation is using active and passive communication to help kind of voters understand the elections process in a way that's relevant to their life with a voter-centric kind of view, because I think that that's where we've been successful in Canton Township, by stepping into the shoes of the voter. And the reason I say that is because one of my favorite quotes, something I picked up a long time ago about non-election related stuff, but that voters think about elections as often as we think about broccoli. Which is not that frequently, and usually just before I'm about to eat some broccoli, which is, voters don't typically make plans, might not check registration status, might be unfamiliar with the process. And so most of our communications along with our processes aren't really designed around the low information folks. Even states that have super inclusive systems still have multiple steps towards obtaining a ballot, voting that ballot, and submitting that ballot so that it's tabulated. And I think that I use that to inform every decision we make in my office, along with how we communicate with voters. For folks who are attending from abroad, Michigan is one of the few states that administers elections at the hyperlocal level. We have 1,520 local election officials or local election jurisdictions. Canton is the 9th largest in the state of Michigan. We have just under 80,000 registered voters, which is the 8th highest voter registration in the state. Michigan is a vote in place state on election day. So I do have 33 precincts at 12 voting locations. My community, pretty diverse. We have the 3rd highest Asian American population at 19.1%, and over 20% of Canton Township was born outside of the United States of America and immigrated here. Arabic is the most common language other than English spoken in Canton. So first, in kind of how we handle the communication, in 2020, we wanted to provide language assistance. We are not a VRA covered community for purposes of Section 203. So there's no requirement to provide foreign language assistance over and above kind of the basic level. But we wanted to do that with poll workers. And so a super cheap, actually a completely free way we went about doing that was documenting the poll workers who we had hired, their ability to speak languages other than English. And then I worked with our local school districts to obtain the English language learner information at the elementary level. Because our elementary schools in Michigan are neighborhood schools, and that gave us a pretty good geographic indicator of where the languages were spoken inside of the community. And so this is not an additional software. This is not a GIS component that we had to use. We had to pay nothing for this. We just essentially found out which languages were spoken in which of the neighborhood schools, and then laid those boundaries over our precincts, and then assigned poll workers accordingly. It was super helpful, super impactful. For purposes of having assistance under AVA. In 2022, we went a little bit deeper. I obtained our Section 203 numbers, and then had to learn kind of how to interpret those. The census website has that information. If you've never looked at it, it might be cool to look at the numbers inside your community to get a feel for what languages you would be covered if they were at that threshold level. Again, keep in mind, these are going to be the languages that are just covered under the 1975 law. So like Arabic is not going to be on here. Any of the European languages will not be on here. So, but I blended both of those kind of data, and what we did is we started providing signage and instructions in other languages. So this is helpful to ensure that we have access for all voters in Canton Township. The second part for communication is a program that we implemented for early voting, early in-person voting in Canton Township. 2024 is the pilot year for early in-person voting for the state of Michigan. Our election system has kind of drastically changed. We now have no reason absentee. Also, we have automatic absentee. So if you opt in, you can essentially become a mail voter in perpetuity in Michigan. And now we also have a mandatory minimum of 9 days of early voting for all federal and statewide elections. So Michigan kind of joining the southern states and some of the western states and having that early in-person voting option. But in doing that, we had some initial challenges, which is, what is early voting turnout going to look like? What days will the voters show up, and then what times will the voters show up? I kind of analyzed Texas, Georgia, Florida, New York, states that had implemented early voting, looked at the turnout in the year that they had implemented it. The turnout for November, with the exception of Georgia, which is a huge anomaly in 2008, really in that first November election, coming in at just under 20% turnout seems to be kind of standard. And then, so I wanted to know what November might do. And then I also wanted to know kind of what this presidential primary was going to do. And that turnout, I assume, would be between 3% and 5%. I hit that one right on the nose. So that's kind of informing how many early voting sites I wanted to have. I was able to obtain the line tracker hourly turnout for early voting, which was in the Bipartisan Policy Center MIT line study, because voters behave a little bit different for early voting than they do on election day. And I had no historical data for Michigan. And then I looked at the daily turnout. I looked at Harris County, obtaining that information online for their 12 days of early voting, this entire state of Georgia for their 19 days of universal early voting. And then I picked Flagler County, Florida, because it's similar in size to Canton. What I noticed were weekends tended to be pretty low turnout, with the exception of the weekend prior to an election. That Saturday for Flagler County was their second highest day of early voting turnout. So now I've kind of got an idea of when voters might show up, what days they might vote, and then what my percentage of my population may choose to vote early. And that allowed me to kind of figure out how many early voting sites I was going to need. I used a free tool from the Center for Inclusive Democracy. It's their voting locator tool, which they have GIS data for the state of Michigan, lots of layers about voter behavior. I could see where my high voter registration numbers were. I could see where my high turnout areas were. And I could also see where my low vote by mail areas are. And I kind of identified those locations for where I wanted to put my early voting sites. I picked 2 community centers, the Summit on the Park, which is our kind of rec center in Canton, and then Village Arts Factory, which is a community village arts center. And that's because we could control those for all 9 days of our required early voting. When I did the math on our turnout for November, I decided I needed 2 sites based on how many people I think are going to be voting daily for early voting. And I set it up accordingly under the broccoli theory, that I wanted to train my voters for our February presidential primary, our August presidential primary, and our November election to know exactly where and when to early vote. So when you look at the February 27th presidential primary, the communities that chose early voting sites in high traffic areas with multiple existing ancillary activities, they saw the greatest participation. Talking about libraries and community centers. Ann Arbor had the highest early voting turnout. Detroit had the second highest, but that Detroit is being the largest city in Michigan by far. How was Ann Arbor able to achieve that? Well, they had 6 early voting sites, and they were able to overperform Detroit, which is roughly 5 times its population. by having 3 of those EV sites at public libraries and having evening hours, by having 2 of their sites at community centers with evening hours, and then 1 of their sites being at City Hall with their normal city hours. Of the 6 of the 7 highest EV communities use this model. Obviously, Canton Township used 2 community centers. Rochester Hills used their library. Macomb Township, a recreation center. West Bloomfield Township used their library as well. So for the purposes of promoting early voting, we had mandatory notice that had to be mailed to all voters. We obviously posted that notice in a newspaper, right? Which we all know isn't going to get the kind of traction that we think. And then we have our kind of built-in government social media accounts. But what I really wanted to do is try to ease the burden on election day. And so my target demographic, we're going to be an older demographic of individuals who may be inclined to vote on election day and not vote by mail. But they want that experience of showing up in person. So I used, outside of our normal promotion methods, we had 2 pretty large discussion groups on Facebook, right? This is my target demographic. And every single day I would post photos and maps of my early voting sites, discussing and educating voters about early voting, how it is a replica of election day. You get to put the ballot in the tabulator yourself as a way to propose to support that. And we saw that folks were showing up. It's a built-in constituency in this case of roughly 40,000 of my 70,000 registered voters, and gives them an opportunity to me to interact with them and educate them. On top of that, I used a passive email communication model, emails that we had on file for every voter who had requested an absentee ballot but had not returned them. As we got closer to election day, we get closer to that no mail zone. I start getting nervous because in Michigan, you need to have that ballot returned by 8 o'clock on election day in order for it to count. And mailing it closer to election day can become a danger. And so I sent out an email to all of the remaining mail or absentee ballots that were still in the hands of voters. And I educated them on a really cool feature that we had just implemented in Michigan, which is this notion that I can bring my absentee ballot to an early voting site and I can convert it into an early voting ballot, and I can put it in the tabulator myself. So I get the best of both worlds. So we educated on that for those folks who still had their ballots in their hands, and we also promoted that they use drop boxes and not mail those ballots back. What we saw is a large increase in the number of folks who were going to our early voting sites, because at this time there were, I think, roughly 7,000 absentee ballots still out. And then we use an active email. This is the first time we had ever done this. Michigan does not have a long history of doing voter education or voter engagement. We have had a very passive system, partially because it's so decentralized, and it's been a bit of a cottage industry up until recently with the new reforms. We've allowed voters to kind of We've put the burden on the voter for interacting with the election system. And this is our first time actively engaging voters. We currently have about emails on file for about half of the voters who are registered in Canton Township. On day 6 of early voting, we had sent an email out to all registered voters in Canton Township, notifying them with an election alert that that we had that Sunday was going to be the last day of early voting. We had images and maps to get them to the early voting site, and educated them on the early voting process, that you will come in, you'll show an ID, you'll get your ballot, you'll put it in the tabulator just like election day. And we kept hitting that just like election day to try to convert those folks to vote in a more convenient model for them. And what we saw for day 7, 8, and 9 is we started doubling our early voting turnout once voters knew that that existed. For future elections, we're going to be, this was all free, right? But for future elections, we're going to be using an email kind of management software that will allow folks to opt out of the active email component of this. Additionally, you're going to want to look at, depending on your state laws, on how you can communicate with those voters, on some of our forms for converting voters to for getting their phone numbers and their emails. We're looking at putting a box that would indicate that they are okay or comfortable receiving communications for future elections, and that they are comfortable with mass text as well, so that we can comply with federal communication requirements. That's how we've used communication in the last couple of years in Canton Township.
All right, fantastic, Michael. Thank you so much. Great, three fantastic presentations, and I hope that you can all see ways in which you can take pieces of this and incorporate it into your elections as well. We don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to ask a question. And you know what? I'm going to jump into the third rail of questions because we got one and I got a personal one on my cell. So let's just talk about it. So one of the things that's sort of in the news right now is whether there are lots of non-citizens that are registered to vote and whether fraud will be a big problem in this upcoming election. We've got a couple of those questions. So I'll just start it, and then I want to hear maybe like 30 seconds from everybody else. You might not believe this or may not appreciate this, but this is actually something that elections administrators take very seriously, are very active in trying to combat, because we want our elections to be as fair and secure as we can make them. All the people on the screen and those elections officials in your states and around the country, we all consider ourselves the referees. We don't consider ourselves combatants. We're not on one side or the other. And so we're not trying to game the system for any particular group or outcome. And so I would just note that the states represented here have pretty good automatic voter registration systems. These are systems where people register to vote at their DMV when they get their driver's license or they get their state ID. That's the very best way. That's the gold standard of registration, because that's when you have a person standing in front of another person providing two forms of ID and demonstrating that they are who they say they are, and that registration then goes in and is provided to the local or state election official. So really good way to do registration. So if you hear in the world AVR is bad, no, it's not. AVR is good. The other thing is that the states here represent ERIC very well, so the Electronic Registration Information Center. Sorry, Tommy, you'll get there eventually. But the ERIC is another great way in which we actually do find people who are either registered fraudulently or voting fraudulently. And because we can compare across states, I can see Michael's registration as it compares to Colorado's registration. And I can see, oh, he's got somebody that's registered in his jurisdiction that's also registered in ours. And so that information then goes to Mesa. Mesa and her team updates that record or sends a mailing to make sure that that person is appropriately registered. So there are lots of things that we can do as election officials that maybe you don't understand or appreciate that are actually really good, but the conversation about those things is not as good. And that conversation, frankly, is misinformation. Those people are typically trying to get you to believe something that's really not true. Let me pass it to, I'll start with Mesa. And, what do you think about the question of voter fraud and non-citizens voting? And, how does that sort of color the way that you're thinking about the upcoming election?
I think you did a good job covering, Judd, what Colorado does now. The easiest way to check is via a voter's ID. Voters in Colorado who are not citizens are issued a specific driver's license that indicates that they're not a citizen. And our statewide voter registration system also performs a HAVA check every time we register someone to vote. So it's examining records from other counties, other states, and making sure that we're not duplicating a record elsewhere. And then it also checks all of our records in Colorado and provides you a list of potential matches that you have to examine before you can continue to register the voter. In terms of voter fraud in general in the election, I think a lot of, I guess I can only speak to Colorado, but Colorado has a lot of things in place to prevent that. Our signature verification is pretty stringent, and we're able to let a voter know pretty quickly whether their ballot is rejected due to a signature discrepancy. Voters are contacted via email if they have it on file. We also, because we have a statewide registration system, we can see whether a voter has voted in another county and therefore not allow them to vote in our county or vice versa. So I think that there are a lot of things in place to prevent voter fraud. It's not something that is at the top of my concern for this upcoming election. My concerns would much more be along misinformation or disinformation lines.
Great. Thank you, Mesa. Tommy?
Yeah, I'll just say that, this is an opportunity, for something like the coalition to really try to educate the public in terms of all the checks and balances that, that we as election officials are required to perform in order to, deal with this idea of non-citizens that are voting. And so, this might be an emerging issue. I mean, it is an emerging issue. That's something that is an opportunity for the coalition to work on over the summer to deliver that message in the fall. So I look at it more kind of procedurally. What would we do? What would we say? If we had the opportunity to test it, that we'd be able to do so, to be able to deliver an even stronger message to the public during that time as we approach the November election.
Yeah, great. And Michael?
Judd, your intro and everything that the panelists have set up to this point is pretty spot on with regards to kind of the two key things we do in election administration, which is A, ensure that the individual who is registered to vote is a qualified voter, and then B, that the individual who is requesting a ballot, whether it's in person or by mail, is the person who is legally entitled to that ballot. We use obviously the biometrics that was talked about before with regards to the signature verification or the physical ID in person. Michigan does have an affidavit option for folks who may not have their ID on them. There's still a signature verification for that after the fact, and 99.5% of our voters have that driver's license and that ID. And then additionally, we're complying with NVRA. We've got that federal ID requirement that it's going to say that they're going to have a driver's license, so they're going to have the last four of their social security number. It's going to identify that individual. Michigan did two kind of key things in 2018 during that period of time. One, we instituted automatic voter registration, which is cool. So for the bulk of the voters who are registered, they're not necessarily registering through that voter registration drive or that mail process where there could be errors on the sheet. We have their address, we have an identification number with them, and we know it's a good, clean record of a human that's registering to vote through that process, and they're doing it through the DMV or Secretary of State. But then also at the same time of kind of cleaning the list up on that end, ensuring that we have good, clean data, we also joined ERIC, and at that point that flagged over 500,000 voters to start that NVRA countdown to have them removed. Michigan saw a massive population loss for over a decade. The states that Michigan residents moved to were Florida, Ohio, and Texas are kind of the top three states. Unfortunately, in the last year and a half, all three of those states have left ERIC due to, ironically enough, voter integrity concerns by some folks, by mostly partisan actors. And so the problem with that is obviously that does harm us with regards to folks being registered in multiple states. But again, there's still things we can do to kind of to catch that. And then, so voter fraud, given the history of election administration over 240 years in this country, and given like the technical professionalism in elections today, I think massive concerns about large scale fraud tend to be more cultural or partisan or philosophical than actual bore out in the data. And I think, prosecutions and court cases kind of show that mathematically we're more inclined to harm someone's right to vote, not through dilution, through fraud, but through technical errors with technology in the precinct that might result in people leaving and having to go to work and not being able to make it back, or people's ballots getting lost in the mail or not getting back in time. Those tend to be more dangerous to the election system as it relates to harming a voter, as opposed to this notion of fraud, which, I think is more philosophical than technical.
All right, so fantastic. They did a great job of explaining, much better than I did. You guys did a great job of explaining that. So I guess to speak to the point, voter fraud is a huge issue, but it's a huge issue from a conversation point of view, from a sort of misinformation. How do I explain what I do well so that people have trust in the election and the outcome? And less so about, I mean, we already have the ways in place that we guard against that. And even when somebody sort of does thread the needle, we're typically going to find that because we're all comparing information after the election. Except for you, Tommy. California, someday, I know you'll join.
Well, we have our state to state, that's the one thing, is at least we're comparing our 58 states within California. So that's a starting point.
Yeah, that's right. Internal, that's good. All right. Well, hey, so fantastic panel. Thank you so much to Mesa, Tommy, and Michael. Really appreciate you joining us today. Their presentations will be made available. So if you saw something on the presentation you really want to follow up on, that's going to be available on the website when we post this. So thank you all three. Appreciate you. And we will move on to our next panel, which is Tova Wang and Scott Pioli. I hope that you two are here with us. And we can go ahead and get started when I see you there on the screen.
We are here.
Ah, there you are.
Good morning.
Fantastic.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning for you all. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, so go ahead,
I'm
Tova.
Tova Wang. Yeah. So I'm Tova Wang. I have been doing voting rights and elections for 23 years. I now do it from the Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by my partner in the work that we're going to talk about in terms of what sports franchises can do with election administrators. By Scott Pioli, who is my partner in this work and also my friend. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to just sort of talk about the things that he's done around this issue and some things that we've been working on together as well. Where to begin? Scott was the vice president of the New England Patriots, general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs, assistant general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, 5 Super Bowls, on and on and on with his accomplishments as an executive in the NFL. He was awarded the NFL Executive of the Year 5 times, NFL Executive of the Decade, and he's now an NFL Network, analyst for NFL Network and CBS Sports. But perhaps as important for the purposes of this conversation is he has been a longtime champion advocate for equity and social justice and has been doing work around those issues for a long time, including civic engagement. He's a fellow at Morehouse College. He's the founding chair of the John Lewis Institute for Social Justice at Central Connecticut State University. He serves on the Women's Sports Foundation Board of Directors. He's the co-founder of Rise to Vote, which I hope he will talk about a little bit later. And I understand that historically, at least, he's also a Mets fan. So you can see that he is, you can see what his loyalty is like. To his sports teams. So I'm going to begin by asking you, Scott, if you were always interested in voting rights and social justice and civic engagement, and what led you to get involved in all this stuff?
Tova, in group, I would say that I wasn't necessarily as interested in understanding voting and access to voting until I became more educated. I've always been about civil rights and equity and equality my entire life. And my work in the civil rights arena is kind of what always had voting on my radar. And I'll say what brought some things to the forefront wasn't too long ago. So I always voted, and I was always about voting rights. Yet I took a job with the Atlanta Falcons in 2014. And in 2014, that was in January. I immediately did all the things I needed to do, including register to vote. There was a primary coming up in June of 2014. That year, which was my first year, I registered to vote. And they needed to do via absentee ballot because I wasn't going to be in Atlanta in June. So that year, my absentee ballot and first attempt at voting in Georgia showed up in July. So I missed my opportunity to vote at that point in time. So then fast forward to November 2014 general elections, and they said, okay, I'm going to vote in person. And we lived in Midtown in the city, and chose not to live out in the country or out in a lot of areas where people that look like me lived. And in 2014, November 4th, I leave my house early, go to our closest polling station, which is a church in the basement of a church right around the corner in the middle of the city. And of course, it's about 30 degrees, in the 30s, overcast, drizzling. And I pull up and I get out of my car, and the line is already coming out of the church, snaking around the parking lot. And I get in line. My job required me at the time to be at work very early. So I waited till about 7:30 and the line wasn't moving. So I decided to go to work and was pretty upset because of this, what had happened in these first two opportunities. And when I get to work, one of my friends who lived in the Buckhead area says to me, he says, well, why don't you just go to the Buckhead Library? Because you don't have one, in Georgia, you don't have one specific place that you can vote. And there's a couple of options. And Buckhead, even though we lived literally in the city, in the middle of the city, Buckhead was only 2 miles away. He said, there's a polling station at the Buckhead Library. Why don't you go there? So I leave work early, get there before it closes, and I can't even make this up. When I got to the Buckhead Library, I'd gone from this line of people, mostly who didn't look like me, in the city in the morning, and rain, drizzle, cold, to the Buckhead Library, where you were greeted, and they literally had cookies and warm cider for folks as you went in. And it was one of those moments that kind of made me think a little. And so then from there forward in 2016, I voted and went directly to the Buckhead Library, skipped the place where I'd been. And all this time I was thinking about things. And Toby, you mentioned I'm on the board of RISE, which is the Roth Initiative in Sports for Equality. And at that point in time, I had joined the board when it first started. The actual CEO and president of the organization RISE, it was Jocelyn Benson. And at that point in time, we were creating this program within RISE, a bunch of different programs. One of the things we came up with was RISE to Vote, because we were very focused on the fact that how much equality has to do with the ability to get to vote and get to the ballot. And during this conversation, I was explaining to Jocelyn, this one conversation, I think it was in 2017, how frustrated I was with the circumstances surrounding my ability to vote, and therefore a lot of people's ability, the lack of comfort, the lack of convenience, the lack of shelter, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of flippantly said to her, I said, we've got this stadium here, we've got this arena here, we've got all this stuff built right in the middle of these communities where there's a lot of people that are marginalized in many ways, who don't have transportation, can't drive to the Buckhead Library like I can. Why aren't we using these facilities that are built with taxpayer dollars, right? The owners aren't paying fees. Why don't we build these, why don't we use these facilities that are built by the people for the people? And she's like, what did you say? And it started this whole conversation. Anyway, that's where this whole thing started, and the whole concept started through RISE to Vote. And then we used our, the convenience of the people on the boards and on the board at RISE to connect with people within the major sports, meaning the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, MLS, NWSL, all the leagues, to communicate with people that had access to the folks that ran stadiums. So that's kind of where the whole thing started, Tova.
Right. And so the light bulb was, wow, there are these spaces, these stadiums and arenas that would be great for polling locations. And so you started down the road of trying to make that happen, which is how we met.
Exactly.
Through Jocelyn Benson. Because I, being a voting person, is already established, and also a very big sports fan myself. had been thinking about this because in 2020, I saw that a bunch of the stadiums and arenas were being used for the elections and for voting. And I got very excited because I felt like, you know, my two worlds here are colliding, like my passion outside of work and my passion in my work. And I also lived very near National Stadium at the time. So I saw, you know, everything going on there. And I said, wow, like, I wonder if this is having any impact on the process. There were 48 teams that had their facilities used in 2020. And a lot of people told me there would be no way to study this, but I figured out a way. And I started working with 4 different scholars from around the country to try and evaluate this and talk to a lot of the owners, well, not the owners, the execs and some of the team front office, talk to you a lot. And we did a report, which I can make available to everybody, demonstrating how amazing this all went for everybody, for the election administrators, for voters. The teams loved it. And it was just terrific all around because the administrators had these spaces that were huge. They could have a lot of machines, right? And there was plenty of parking. The teams, you know, you can attest to this, I suppose. They know how to make lines move. Like that's what stadium staff are
Yeah, no,
experts in.
Toby, to that point, one of the executives that we talked to said this is brilliant because our job, this is what we do. We move lines.
That's right.
Move lines of people in and out of events. And that was one of the quotes I remember that you and I both got from an executive that had to do with your study. Go ahead, please.
And you saw it also just firsthand how well it went, I think. You know about what went on, you know, with the Hawks and State Farm, and some of these other stadiums and arenas where it was just, it was fun for people in addition to it just being really smooth, and you could get people in and out very quickly, which kind of is the most important thing to voters. And so what, you know, what have you heard from the people who are doing it in 2020 and to other people around the industry who have been part of this conversation?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I hope folks do take you up on your offer to look at the study, or at least the 1 or 2 pager that have, you know, condenses all the information, because I think one of the most important things from the everyone here is interested in voting. That's what's important to us. That the people that we're going to, that's not necessarily what their primary focus is. But the reason that I think so many teams felt it was great because it gave them an opportunity to truly live for a day or more the value that most teams talk about, which is engaging with their community at a grassroots level. And the teams were excited because it gave them another opportunity to engage with their fans and engage with their citizens within the city. And truthfully, the one thing that I heard was fascinating, I was hearing offline, was how folks were so happy to get folks into the stadium and to mingle with people that don't normally go to the stadium. Because one of the whole ideas behind this, Tova, as you know, was the fact that these stadiums get built by taxpayer dollars, but most of the taxpayers that help build that can't afford the ticket. So now they're getting charged twice, and they can't afford to go to some of the events. So here it was for the first time, they get to see some of these stadiums. They're spectacular. And they're stadiums, they're arenas, they're on college campuses, they're for pro teams, they're everywhere. And I think what hit people in a number of places and with teams that I talked to and organizations that I talked to afterwards, Tova, it was the ability to be engaged with the community, show off what they had, to maybe recruit more people. It was a fun event. But, you know, I think another thing that was really important that came out of this was particularly in the people where they had to set up. Again, we're talking about November, and I know we're talking about early voting, a lot of things, but if you're going to set this up in November, in a lot of places across this country, the weather isn't very kind. And that was what affected me at first to make me think about this. But they actually felt good that they provided this not only access to vote, but it was in a sheltered space, that they were in a sheltered space, that their team mascot that was running up and down the line, shaking hands with his babies, you know,
we have
some of them
pictures.
had
This is actually
players.
true.
Yeah, some of the
I mean,
teams had players there, had their athletes there. You
Yeah.
know, I know that I believe out in Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team had their people. They're going to have their players there. So it was a real opportunity for teams once again to serve, but also do some of the marketing that they're always looking to do.
No, there are some great photographs actually of some of the Colts players in Indianapolis greeting voters. And you know, I'm going to say, look, I mean, I'm a sports fan. And I have particular fan allegiances, which I hesitate to ever bring up in public because a lot of people don't like the same teams as me. But I know that I would be more excited to go to vote in these places if I'm one of those people who's just not that sure about, you know, oh God, where's my polling place? You know, I don't have time for this. It might be an extra encouragement. And I will say, and giving myself away, sadly for me in a way, it was, well, not sadly, ironically, Fenway did a great job. Not saying who I root for. Fenway did a great
Pretty
job,
obvious.
including in yeah, okay. So in 2022, they did it again. And I always forget her name. Like there's the Green Monster guy, and then there's the Mrs. Green Monster woman, which she has a name, and I'm forgetting her name. Someone can put it in the Q&A. It's very funny, and people were, this is sad, you know, taking pictures with the World Series trophies and stuff like that. But it was great. I mean, it was great for people. And you know, again, the election administrators really enjoyed, I think, the partnerships with the people, with the teams. It's kind of something different for them. I mean, I can imagine then and now, it's sort of like, there's not a lot that's fun right now about elections. And it's very, very, very stressful. And I think that these kinds of partnerships, again, can be, I don't know, that it was a kind of a feel-good thing also for everybody. I mean, you know, voters, yes, but also the people who put it together, including the team staff in some places, served as poll workers and
Correct.
greeters and all of that. And, you know, it was, I don't know, I think it was a pretty amazing and in some cases moving experience for people, especially in a situation which will probably be worse this year where you're trying to recruit poll workers. I mean, not only to have the team staff there, but I would guess that more people would be excited about volunteering to be a poll worker in a space like that, around that, in that environment. So,
Tova, I'll add this, you know, because one of the clubs that I know that, so what's happened is since then I've been engaged with a number of teams across different sports. And there's one team in particular in a state where they're having a great deal in terms of finding poll workers has become an issue for most everyone. And they have found ways to partner with, like, for instance, with this organization called Vet the Vote, which is a veterans group that is, you know, that they're training people to become poll workers. And it is nonpartisan, and it's a group of people that really wants to see people get to the ballot and get there to vote. And this state has used that organization, Vet the Vote, or We the Vets. Vet the Vote is one of their programs, but it's We the Vets. And with that, because of the teams partnerships with it's an NFL team with teams partnerships that they have every year in Military Month, and where they honor veterans and honor the military. There's now they're using some of the other organizations that they have relationships with to actually exponentially grow the work that they're doing with other partners in other spaces for things like poll workers, as you mentioned, Tova.
yeah, I mean, that was one thing. And then I know, well, for example, just because State Farm stood out so much in so many ways around this. I mean, they had 50,000 voters come through that arena. They processed 50,000 voters in that arena in 2020, which is extraordinary. And, you know, the feeling is, at least, we do not have actual data on this, is that it probably made the voting situation, alleviated the burden for election administrators and alleviated long lines in other places because there was this huge space. By the way, another point that has been made to me, because people don't always think of these things, but I think maybe election administrators do, is they have plenty of electrical power. You don't have to worry about, you know, things like electricity. You know, it's just, I don't know, I heard from from everybody. Honestly, we interviewed, dozens of people from teams and administrators and other people involved in this stuff. And everyone had really positive feedback. And I'll say one other thing that's important. None of these people reported back to us that they got like serious blowback, like on social media or, emails, any of that kind of stuff. There was no really super negative response that they heard back, which is pretty striking. And I should mention that Michael Hamner, was part of our research team, he's at the University of Maryland. He did a poll with the Washington Post a while ago, and it showed, I have this exact number, but an overwhelming majority of people who took the survey for the Washington Post supported using stadiums and arenas for voting. So this is sort of like for teams and corporations, because they are ultimately corporations, right? Who may be leery about getting involved in anything, given the political climate. It seems like this is a way they can do that and give back to the community and be part of upholding democracy. That's not really all that controversial.
Right. And you mentioned the corporations and the companies. I think that's part of it too, Toba, where I think now as this is coming to another year, a number of the stadiums aren't team or owned by the owners that own the franchises, so to speak.
Right.
Sometimes they're run and owned by counties, cities, there's AEG, there's a number of corporations, but what they're doing is they're understanding this moment too, and then they can use whatever, it's an opportunity for them to brand themselves as well. Again, in a community that wouldn't normally see their branding if they're not in the stadium for whatever event or game that's going on. And I really believe that one of the more untapped spaces is, again, because I come from the NFL and professional sports, we spend a lot of time talking about the pro teams, but there are so many, I was listening to some of the folks earlier speaking, and you're in areas and counties and regions and communities where there's colleges and universities, and every college and university, well, most every college and university has some sort of either arena or convention space, or even 10,000 seat spaces, some 8,000 seat spaces that are indoors that could, really help the circumstance and do some of the same things, especially at a point in time we're trying to educate students and younger people about not only the importance to vote, but voting. They don't, and as I've said this to Tova, a lot of the younger voters don't care about the same things that I care about, and they're a different group. And what this is all founded in, Tova, going back to your original question that you asked me about, to me, this has always been about equity. And this has always been about people from marginalized groups and marginalized, in any way, providing access and an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise get. And I think that there's spaces and places where if we make, again, the space that they go to vote not only easier, but a little bit more comfortable, they'd be willing to do it.
So I want to just, before going to Q&A, talk about what we're trying to do this year, which is, make this happen bigger and better, right? And so we have started talking to teams and election administrators. I'm hoping that some of you who are watching right now will be interested in doing these kinds of partnerships with fun people like Scott, because that's who you'd be working with. To do these kinds of things that will make, I think, your lives easier with the election and that fans enjoy. So what are you thinking about for 24, Scott? What are we doing?
Well, what's interesting is it seems like every 2 years, the pun intended, the goalposts are changing, and there's different rules, there's laws, and different things that are affecting what can be used, or if it can, or how things can be used in different states and different areas. And I think, I know what's happening right now is the NFL, because of the timing of the season, they're just getting around to what they're planning to do with some of the stuff they're going to ask owners to do. But then, I've spent time with Adam Silver and Kathy Behrens at the NBA, They are, if you have an NBA team in your city, in your area, in your region, the work they're doing is absolutely amazing. They, in fact, intentionally, the NBA and the WNBA intentionally do not schedule games on election day. They give people, everyone has off on election day throughout those two leagues because they not only want players, their employees to be able to vote, but they want to be used. So the NBA is once again doing that, but they're making a much stronger push this year to encourage folks to have more arenas available. So what's happening right now, this is the time where people are really starting to mobilize and figure things out, where it's becoming a little bit different. The good news is that there's going to be early voting and more absentee voting to get more people to be able to vote. The bad news is that affects and impacts the places that would potentially make themselves available for it. And when can they do it? When can't they do it? I know, Toby, you've been involved in some of the discussions we've been having with one Secretary of State. They're trying to figure out, what, because of their early voting, can they have access to their stadiums and arenas in their city or not? So a lot of it is very fluid right now, Toba, but I do know that I would say that this year, as much as any year, each year it's increasing, and the availability and the desire to do so has increased. So I think there's a real opportunity for folks out there.
Well, and you have mentioned to me also, getting to your wheelhouse, that the NFL sort of has their off day on Tuesdays. That's when everybody gets the day off, so that players and everybody else could be doing all sorts of things out. No?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely.
So I'm going to say the general manager.
Make a bad joke. When it used to be games were just on Sundays and Mondays.
Yeah.
Players' day off was for all 32 teams would be Tuesday, but that has shifted a little bit with the fact that we're playing games more than just 1 or 2 days a week. So,
well, if you're not playing Monday night,
it does remain true. Tuesday is the players' day off. Yes. Right. And that's when they do most of their community service work, which that becomes big again. So if you have an NFL team, maybe even getting ahead with their community relations department to see if you can have access to players, or if there are players that might be interested, especially younger players. Older players, they have the places that are going to be their go-to places for community service for the most part. Younger players are always looking for something to become their thing. So again, I just encourage folks to consider that.
I know that there are a lot of questions, and so I'm going to turn it to Judd to put them out there to us. And we have I've been joking with Judd. We're going to have a breakout room later to talk about sports, like other than this.
That would be a very fun breakout.
And you can ask Scott about your team's draft or something.
And this is a joke. You can ask Toba about the Yankees.
You gave me up. Classic.
Well, so I do have a question. So so we probably have I put a number on it, but let's say 50, 60, 70 election officials on the call, and but many of them are from smaller jurisdictions, so they're not from major U.S. cities, so they don't have access to kind of large arenas. But if you were advising them, hey, how can they approach their minor league baseball team, their local college team, to try to get access to their facility, maybe for one day, or if it's appropriate in the schedule, maybe they can even get it for early voting. What would you tell them? What's the short elevator speech for that kind of conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, it was also minor league facilities in 2020 in some places, and there are a lot of places where the minor league team, those are like that's where it's all happening. That's the spot. We also just learned that I guess the Aces in particular, but I know this is true in other places, their practice facility is apparently spectacular. So that's
the Las Vegas Aces.
What did I say?
No, I was just saying the Las Vegas Aces for those.
Yeah, the Aces. I will say, the WNBA season is perfect for all this kind of work because they go from May to October. But in any case, there are other types of places like that where I think there's just as much enthusiasm. And as Scott said, there are colleges and universities that have places. And then I would just say, the fan base is everywhere. So if we can get the teams involved, even in the smaller places, that I think that would be phenomenal for people's experiences.
I would just add, Jed, the fact is, again, I come from a professional sports place, but along with professional sports teams, the minor leagues, there's minor league hockey, there's minor league, there's G League basketball, there's these smaller arenas, there's all these things. But to me, there's so many arenas out there. Like when I think college campuses, I think on the campus of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the center, they have a center right there on campus where they play their games. On the campus of Villanova in Pennsylvania. Most major college campuses have arenas. I mean, even I worked 100 years ago at Murray State University, Murray, Kentucky. They have the Racer Center, which is it's a beautiful indoor, I think it's now a 9,000 seat arena that's on campus. What I would say is to prepare, I would first find out if there's an arena in your area. And again, it doesn't have to be a professional sports team. If there's an arena or a convention center, I think about Boston, in the city of Boston, there's the convention center in Boston. Find out who owns it. Now, who owns it isn't always necessarily who runs it. So sometimes find out who owns it, runs it, and is the access point, and then approach those people. Because I think that's where a lot of the time can get, unfortunately, wasted or spent trying to find the point of contact of who's running the stadium. Like I remember that was a big thing in Cleveland where the Cuyahoga County ended up they ran one, but then I think it was AEG ran another one or owned. And so finding that information and accessing the proper point of contact. Does that answer what you were asking, Judd?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you've kind of spoken to the central issue, which is you be proactive as an elections administrator. Go out and make the phone call, make the contact, find the person you need to be speaking to, and find your way through that maze and figure out how you can use these places.
Yeah, and people see this in the report. But by the way, there's a 15 or so page executive summary. There is a 90-something page academic type paper, which I'm also happy to share. But
I recommend the 15-page or the 3-page. You also have to.
Anyway, we did talk to a number of election administrators and the teams and have a bunch of sort of like, you can't call them best practices, I know, because every situation is going to be different, but a lot of description of the ways in which they made it work. And it was these great partnerships, and they worked together on logistics, and everyone had positive things to say about it. I can't say if that would happen in every occasion, but so we do have kind of models for how to make it work if people are interested in learning about some of that.
And I want to add to this, and I think this is an important point, is you're right, Tova. I did not hear one piece of negative feedback from anyone. And I will say this, and I can say this factually, it was both sides of the aisle. This was not just one group of people that was saying, oh, this was fantastic, this was wonderful. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia when it happened. And the people in Atlanta, Georgia, including the person that ran their official, their election, were very happy. So this is, again, I think it's important to understand, especially you folks that do, I don't do your job, you do your job. It's amazing work that you do, and it's important work. And I think more people than you realize respect the work that you do and want to help.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and kind of giving us some insight into this sort of niche area of elections administration and the connections that we can make to sort of prioritize our voters. One of the things that I've really taken from this idea, yes, they're great facilities because they have amazing parking lots. They are big and have internet and all of the kinds of things that you need to have to kind of run a big polling place or vote center. But the thing that really hit me is everybody in a community knows where the stadium is. And
Yes.
often you're not, when you tell people, like here in Denver or in Arapahoe County, which is just south, you might tell people, go to Centerpoint. That's a big place to go vote. Well, half of the community doesn't know where Centerpoint is, but they sure know where the local stadium is. And so that's a great way to sort of get to those low information voters.
And
So
there's transportation. Generally,
that's right.
transportation to those.
That's right. Bus lines and rail lines, often that's because they're trying to connect that facility.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
in 2020, a couple of teams even paid for the transportation for people to come to the stadium to vote. So a lot of different ways in which these partnerships can work.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, thank you so much. I think it's fair to say that Scott wins the background award for this event.
I told Toe this. So I do TV now for NFL. So I have to have the silly set up. So I told Toe I may go find a closet to go do this in, but
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic. I
Thank you.
love the background. It's fantastic.
I
All right.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much again. It's wonderful to have both of you, and really interesting little, important note for elections administrators.
And Judd, if folks
Great.
want to reach out to me, please reach out
Yeah.
to Judd, who can find me, and I'll see if I can serve you in some way. Please.
That's great. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Judd.
Thank
Thank
you. All right, so we are going to take like 90 seconds here to get the next group up because we've got a couple of slideshows that need to get loaded. So we'll go dark here for a second, but we'll be right back. All right, I think we are ready to go. Thank you again for joining us today. So far, if you're just joining at this point, you missed a panel on low-cost, quick ways to improve your elections for 2024. And that information will be made available so you can go back and watch that if you need to. And then we just had a panel with sort of a fireside chat, kind of the electronic version of a fireside chat, where Tova Wang and Scott Pioli discussed using arenas and stadiums as possible polling places. And now we'll finish up with one last panel. And this one is a kind of an interesting one in that we have a lot of local election officials on the call. And this one is sort of positioned at the state level in many respects, but it's state down to local. So we're hopeful that the kinds of things we'll talk about here can provide some financial assistance and program assistance to local elections officials as well as states through the various grant and other opportunities that we have. So let's go ahead and get started. So first up, we're going to talk to Kate Conley. As you can see from the screen, she is the Senior Advisor to the Director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, so CISA, which is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. And why don't I go ahead and hand it to her and she can get started with the presentation.
Thanks, Judd. And after looking at that slide, I certainly get the award for, I think, the longest title out there. So great to be here with you all. And first, really just want to say on behalf of the agency, on behalf of our director, Jen Easterly, a huge thank you to all of you who are truly on the front lines of defending our democratic process. We are so proud to play a role in just trying to help you all fulfill this really sacred and important duty to the American people. And so thank you for what you do, and thank you for all of the work that goes into that's year round. So as Jed said, I represent CISA. In terms of what CISA is, for those who may not be totally familiar, so we are the federal government lead in helping the election infrastructure sector help secure election infrastructure against the range of physical, cyber, and operational risks that look to undermine its security or resiliency. And so what that really means is we have teams of folks back at our headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, but most importantly, all across the country. So in all 50 states, DC, and our territories, we have hundreds of folks who are our cybersecurity advisors, our physical security advisors, and most recently, election security advisors who are out there on the front lines, really meeting you all where you're at in terms of helping provide free services, information, and tools to help you all understand how these risks may present to your unique jurisdictional needs. So some of the services that our teams offer include things like cyber or physical security assessments, where they'll go and they'll help identify, here are areas that are currently gaps that you could close, and here are some potential ways to close that gap, right? Like here are some potential solutions in either the physical or cyber domain to help just make your office, your staff, your voters, your overall process even more secure. And so with that, though, we recognize that just saying, hey, here's things you can do without helping you do them is not really maximizing our value to you. So there are some services that CISA offers for free. We do offer free cybersecurity services like vulnerability scanning and web application scanning, where we basically are able to tell you if there's any known exploitable vulnerabilities so you can close them before a nefarious actor does. We do that for networks everywhere and is basically a way to help you just, again, better understand what your internet-facing vulnerabilities are of your network, so you can do something about it before a malicious actor does, because I promise you they're also doing those scans. So that's an example of some of the free services we offer to, again, help you actually close that gap between knowledge and action and actually reduce risk. But we also acknowledge there are certain things that we don't offer as a service that does require resourcing. At the end of the day, it's going to take money, whether it's on the physical or cyber side. And so one of the ways as the Department of Homeland Security, which we are a part of, we're trying to help tackle that is through some of our federal grant programs. And one of, I think, the most important and impactful ways we've been able to evolve that is the types of grant programs that can apply to election security. So what I'd say is, from the Department of Homeland Security standpoint, there's really 3 types of grants that we provide that can help you. There's the Homeland Security Grant Program, which I'm going to come back to in more detail. There's the state and local cybersecurity grant program. And then there's the nonprofit security grant program. So I'll start from the reverse because I want to spend more time on the Homeland Security Grant Program and really the value there, and especially the election security requirement that we've integrated into it. But in terms of the nonprofit security grant program, this was really intended to help harden the physical security of nonprofit organizations that are at a high risk. And so ways that this could be useful for you all is, I know the previous panel was talking about other locations that are utilized to support the elections process, right? Like other locations that you use to serve as a polling place or vote center. So this is a good example of how, if a nonprofit organization is one of those types of entities that you engage with to be used also as a voting center or polling center, encouraging them to try to apply for it and to utilize funds from the Department of Homeland Security to help secure their location overall could also benefit the election security mission. So again, and these are all available, and I can drop a link in later, but the nonprofit security grant program from the Department of Homeland Security is something that some members of your community could tap into to, again, help harden their physical security. The second program that I want to talk about is the state and local cybersecurity grant program. This is newer. This was introduced because we do know that advancing cybersecurity is very much dependent upon having not just the right knowledge of what you need to do, but the right resources. And so recognizing that network security, in this case, election security, is national security. How do we help address some of that? So this program provides funding to state and local governments and territories to address cybersecurity risks and threats to state and local and territorial information systems. It allows for targeted cybersecurity investments. It's a 3-year pay of performance plan. And that, again, is really to just help enhance your security maturity for your overall office and that of your jurisdiction. So cyber and that plan is really targeted for that specific type of threat stream. The third one that I want to get into, and I think is really, a great resource, especially for this community, is the Department of Homeland Security's Homeland Security Grant Program, HSGP. So this thing was initiated about 20 years ago, right after 9/11, and it was really focused on helping state and local governments improve their security based on terrorism-related threats. And so what you've seen this program do over 20 years is a lot of law enforcement entities are leveraging this for enhancing security capabilities. We've seen this enhance other security of government buildings. While this funding stream can be used for cyber or physical, I really think the application for the physical security needs of election offices and government facilities is a very compelling and huge win with this grant program itself, and is very easy to translate into the grant requirements. And so the Homeland Security Grant Program has two, technically three, but I'll focus on two subordinate grant programs that you might be a little bit more familiar with. One is called the State Homeland Security Grant Program. So if you've heard of SHSP, and then the Urban Area Security Initiative, UASI. So State Homeland Security Grant Program and UASI are all subcomponents of the Homeland Security Grant Program. HSGP, this overall bucket, we as the Department of Homeland Security mandated a 3% minimum spend requirement for every state. So we basically said, if you, a state, are going to apply for any of these funds, there is a requirement that at a minimum, 3% of those requested grant funds for HSGP must be allocated towards election security, and you must do that in consultation with your state chief election official. I will tell you, this is a newer requirement. This is only the second year that it's been in place. And so with that, there's still some process and awareness that we're really trying to help increase. But within your state, there's something called the state administering agency. And that's the state government representative that's responsible for submitting all these applications. And every state has their own process for how those applications are submitted. If there's county committees or if it's a state-run process. So that varies. But getting into that process and providing them with tangible requirements to submit is something that we deliberately were intending with the Homeland Security Grant Program. And again, when people say, well, it's not that much money, 3% for election security was the minimum spend requirement, minimum. So it can be more than that. But this is something that we're hoping becomes a routine expectation in that grant program, so that way we can forecast this into coming years. But examples of things you can use that for, right? So I talked to you earlier about CISA provides in-person office assessments, whether it's cyber or physical. Well, if you have recommendations from those assessments that are currently unfunded, those are perfect examples of things to submit for our grant programs to help get the department to provide funding for you to implement those recommendations. And so this is where we try to get it to come full circle, right? We're going to provide assessments, then provide federal grant opportunities that can help you implement those assessments and really close that loop in terms of risk identification and risk management. So in terms of CISA and the Department of Homeland Security, I know we don't have a lot of time and I could easily spend 30 minutes just deep diving these programs, but here's the big things to please remember. There's really three big bins of grant programs to explore. You have the nonprofit one that could be useful for potential polling locations or vote centers for your community partners that are nonprofits. You have the state and local cybersecurity grant program, again, to help state and local governments and territorial governments increase their overall information network security. And then the third, and this is really where I think your offices in particular can benefit working into this system, is the Homeland Security Grant Program. either on the State Homeland Security Grant Program side or the Urban Area Security Initiative side, with providing recommendations or requirements rather to meet that 3% minimum spend requirement. And so these are just, again, mechanisms to access federal funding to help address some of the gaps that you may have. In addition to that, please do come and contact your CISA field service representative for some of the free services that we just offer every day, whether it's in-person assessments, whether it's some of our cybersecurity services, all of those things. Please use us. We're here to help with trainings, in person or virtual, to include tabletop exercises. Really, there's a suite of things that we would love to help bring to you all at the county and state level. So I'd ask you to check out our Protect 2024 website. On that, it has the full list of things that we can bring to bear for you. So thank you, Judd, and thank you for the time with this crew today. It is a privilege to be with you all. Please let us know how we can help, and thank you for what you do.
Thanks, Kate. That was fantastic. You really gave us a lot of information there. I really appreciate it. And I would just note for those of you that are on the call, maybe local election officials, some of the elections specialists at the local regions are even on this presentation. So they've literally joined us. So they are very linked into the work that we do, the kinds of events that we participate in like this. So, and in many respects are very recently past election officials. So they really understand and know the work that you do and the challenges that you face. Thank you, Kate. We will come back to questions for you. Thank you. Ben Hovland, you are next in the queue. Really appreciate you being here. The EAC got a nice plug in the first panel when Tommy Gong talked to us about winning one of the awards through the EAC for the wonderful work that they were doing. And I'd love to hear what other kinds of funding opportunities and services the EAC can provide here in these last kind of 5.5 months to the November election.
Thanks, Judd. It's great to be here. I have mitigated my own risk in honor of Kate and our federal partners at CISA by not operating the slides myself. So I will not have, hopefully, technical issues on my end, but appreciate the help from the Humphrey School. So next slide, please. Hopefully, you all are familiar with the Election Assistance Commission. If not, just a quick overview here. We are a small federal agency with a mission to help election officials improve the administration of elections and help Americans participate in the process. Next slide. And so again, we were created by the Help America Vote Act now 22 years ago. And with that, we have 4 primary missions in my mind. 1, testing and certifying voting equipment. 2, one of the thing that we're here to talk about today, which is distributing grants. We also do the EVE survey, the Election Administration and Voting Survey, which is the only national survey of its kind that looks at how Americans are participating in the process, how they're getting registered, how they're voting. Appreciate the folks on this webinar who fill that out. Thank you. And then finally, the broadest bucket is serving as a national clearinghouse for best practices in election administration. This is an area that has been expanding in recent years, and I'll talk about a little bit toward the end. But first and foremost, we're here to talk about grants. Next slide. And I think that's a critical conversation. Right now, when I look across the elections landscape, elections are harder than they've ever been to run, and they're more expensive. And so having real conversations about what the funding of elections looks like at the state, federal, and local level, I think is critical. We love being able to distribute HAVA grants, but again, they're just a drop in the bucket when you look at the overall funding of elections. So if you're familiar with historic HAVA funding, I've skipped a lot of it here. With original HAVA, you had over $3 billion. Most of that got distributed and essentially came to an end around 2010. And so there were several years where we didn't see federal funding. That restarted again in 2018. So those we broadly call the HAVA security grants. And so you can see here from 2018 forward, there's been just over $1 billion in HAVA security grants. A couple things that I think are important to think about on these is their flexibility, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But also, these go to every state and territory in the country. They largely, there's a minimum that gets tied for each distribution, and then it follows a population formula. As you can see, we saw more in 2018 and 2020, and then we with $380 million and $425 million respectively. And then 22 and 23 were $75 million each fiscal year. And then the most recent congressional appropriation came in with $55 million. Those funds don't expire once we've distributed them to the states. So where different states are varies across the country on those spend levels. Next slide, please. One of the things I was mentioning was that this is very flexible money, and we really think that that is important. I think the two biggest things to me about the importance of HAVA security grants are, one, that they're dedicated election funding. I welcome any funding for elections, but so often we see that if at every level of government, when elections has to compete with other priorities, often elections gets left out. And so the great thing on the election security grants is, or the HAVA grants, is they're only for elections. And primarily, the main point is that they're for improving federal elections. And so we have seen this money be used to replace paperless equipment, to improve or replace or upgrade statewide voter registration databases. We see it used in trainings, tabletop exercises, etc. Really an array of different uses, because we know each state is in a different place. We've also seen it used around physical security, and recently the commission voted unanimously to explicitly state that it could be used to combat AI-generated disinformation. Again, this is very flexible money, and really, to me, the bigger challenge is there enough for all of those, for the needs in all of those areas? Next slide, please. So here you can just get a little bit of a sense of how states have used this money. From what I was talking about earlier, again, far and away, the biggest category we've seen this money spent on is cyber and physical security, followed by replacing voting equipment. Again, a lot of paperless equipment got replaced, particularly after the first sort of tranche of this funding in 2018. Mentioned voter registration systems. This is another big area where we've seen states either replace their statewide voter registration database or harden that with things like with multi-factor authentication, et cetera. And so, to me, again, this funding's been very critical. I think it's important to tell the story of it. I'll flag here, you can see about 50% has been used. I will say this is from reporting as of September of 23. We just got recent reports in, but have not combed through that data yet to fully update this. So a little bit more of this will be spent, and we'll update these accordingly in the next few weeks. But just wanted to give you a sense of how this money has been spent. And then if you want to go to the next slide. I also wanted to talk about, we talk about grants a lot, but when I think about what are the resources that are out there, the resources that EAC or federal government or other partners can provide, certainly grants and dollars are a huge part of it, but there are other resources as well that can save jurisdictions money. So this area of the clearinghouse that I mentioned at the EAC has really been an area we've been able to expand in recent years. We've seen some funding increases at the EAC, and a lot of that has gone into expanding the clearinghouse function. As we know from the wheel graphic here, there are so many responsibilities for election administrators. And so we've been working through that, looking at different ways to create resources that will hopefully save election administrators time and or money. Next slide, please. One of those that we've seen a lot of uptake on, National Poll Worker Recruitment Day. This is something that we started in 2020. This year it's on August 1st, but along with that day of action, we've also created toolkits, customizable graphics, and we've seen jurisdictions in states from over 41 states participate in this. When you take out the states that don't have poll workers, it's a pretty good uptake. And we also saw a territory participate with Help America Vote Day in January. So encourage you to check out helpamericavote.gov there for some resources and toolkit information around participating for this year's National Poll Worker Recruitment Day. Next slide. Similarly, this just came out last week. We just recently released this election official social media toolkit. Again, recognize that a lot of offices don't have a graphic designer, maybe don't have dedicated social media staff. Usually that's maybe you as the election official. A great presentation earlier for Michael Segrist about doing voter outreach and reaching out and doing voter education. So this toolkit, again, goes through and has customizable graphics and sample text that can be tweaked, again, to talk about, your voter registration deadline in your state, put in your link. It's got the alt text to make it accessible. Again, this is on our website and a great way, hopefully, to save time and do more with voter education. I think this area is something that is going to be more and more critical. Obviously, we've seen the mis and disinformation of the last few cycles, but as people talk about generative AI and what the future looks like, I mentioned earlier that elections are harder to administer and more expensive than they've ever been. I also will say that to me, I know that so often voter education it has become or is a back burner issue, is maybe not invested in or focused on as much. Certainly when you have statutory requirements and other priorities, it's hard to do that. I think the information environment that we're in is forcing us to be in a place where it's no longer optional. And so this is another area to potentially, take advantage of resources from partners. Next slide, please. And speaking of partners and resources, another thing that the DAC has created is the clearinghouse community. This is a national network for election officials where people can share resources, can share templates, can ask questions of their colleagues around the country. Certainly, this is a virtual conference, but so often the benefits of attending these in person is the ability to have that conversation over the break, while you're getting coffee. We created the clearinghouse community to allow that to happen year round. Again, have seen great examples of it. One that I flag occasionally, somebody put in there, hey, does anybody have any good voter education material on encouraging people to fill out the bubble properly on the ballot? And sure enough, Steve Deitch, who is one of our subject matter experts, and you see his contact information there, threw up, oh, hey, in the Clearinghouse Awards or the Clearys last year, there was a jurisdiction that was recognized and won for that, and connected this jurisdiction to those resources, and they were able to tailor it to their needs. So a great community and conversation and opportunity here. Next slide, please. Finally, I know I've hit a lot here. If you haven't been to the EAC website in a while, we've got a lot of things going on that we're very proud of. And so we created this newsletter because every month there are new resources coming out. And this is sort of a one-stop for you. It's a monthly newsletter that will keep track of our new resources, hearings that we do, other things that we flag that are relevant to election officials. So encourage you to sign up for that as well, to be kept up to date on what resources we see and are coming out. Next slide. And again, here's our general contact information where you can find us on social, and certainly welcome any feedback from any of you. Next slide. and you can always reach out to me. So thank you, Judd, and thanks to the folks from the Humphrey School for including us today.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ben. A lot of great information there. And I think one of the things that I take away from that is if you're a local elections administrator and you would like some of that federal money that's been directed to your state, tell your state, because the state very likely has some money that they received or are receiving now through that additional HAVA money. And the state, I work for the state, so I'm sympathetic to this, but the state takes that money and we think of ways to use it and we kind of go like this. Okay, great. Now we can do that thing that we wanted to do. But, you know, we really should be prioritizing our local communities. And if we can redirect that money, we'd like to. So, you know, let your state know that you need that money. All right, Ben, thank you so much. Let's move to Sam Oliker-Friedland, who is going to talk to us about sort of the private world of elections funding. And is there money? I don't know. We can hear from Sam. Also, what kind of limitations are there in the access of that money? So Sam, take it away.
Hey folks, thank you for allowing me to join you today. I'm Sam Oliker-Friedland. I lead the Institute for Responsive Government. I'm only correcting my title in the front slide here that we are not the Institute for Responsive Federal Government. And I'm correcting that only because I think the entire point of my presentation today is going to be that you all, the local election officials on this call, are doing the hardest, most important work to make our democracy run. And when we look for sort of responsive, smart, practical innovation going on in government, we often look to you all and your local colleagues across the country as sort of in many ways, the folks who sort of drive change that bubbles up nationally. And that's really the story of sort of what I want to talk to today. And I don't have a slideshow just so we can sort of like talk through this, but I'm really excited to see what questions you all have. And to Judd's point, you know, we're not going to have any sort of major announcements today about availability of private support for election administrators in 2024, but I wanted to sort of tell you the story of what has happened since 2020, some of the sort of changes that have happened since 2020 in the places where election officials and philanthropy and money interact, and then talk a little bit more about how actually sort of the story of private money in election administration has become the story of how we get enough public money into election administration. And just want to sort of like double underline at the end of this presentation things that Ben and Kate were saying about ways that government of all levels can step up more to sort of provide you all what you need. One final note, so I do not work at the Center for Tech and Civic Life. We partner closely with CTCL, and the entire CTCL team is actually in a staff retreat today. So that's the reason that you're stuck with me to give this presentation. But sort of we're a partner that does a lot of the legal and policy work related to CTCL's work to help local election officials. So we are admirers of many of you behind the scenes. At the same time that I think you've probably worked more directly with CTCL. So for those of you who don't know on this call, we worked with CTCL on a COVID response grant program in 2020 that ended up giving out a little above $400 million total of philanthropic money directly to local election administrators to support your work in probably the most challenging election, hopefully, of all of our lifetimes. That went to over 2,500 cities and counties across the country. Every election official sort of got what they applied for and were able to apply that to infrastructure needs like poll workers, new equipment, COVID safety measures, et cetera. The median jurisdiction size that received that money in 2020 was under 25,000 voters. So this was a sort of predominance actually of small jurisdictions across the country that most badly needed funds and were most able to sort of nimbly deploy those funds for things that they needed in 2020, and can sort of answer any questions that folks have about the 2020 program. But the sort of headline is this was designed with local election officials in mind to plug in a sort of emergency infrastructure need. What I'm going to talk about now is ways since 2020 that we have worked to try to make this less of an emergency, so to speak, and then sort of flag what we see as the emergency still lingering in 2024. So broadly speaking, I think that one of the most lasting aspects of the pandemic was an expectation that election officials across the country run sort of multiple elections at once, be that high vote by mail volume paired with high early voting volume paired with high in-person volumes, and driving sort of costs up as those vote modalities ended up being sort of even in various jurisdictions. And while election officials may not be paying as much for hand sanitizer or masks or typical health safety things this year as they were in previous years, election administrators across the country are still paying for that pandemic level of sort of different kinds of elections running at the same time. And that's paired with ongoing public underinvestment in election administration at sort of every level of government. And so that's the sort of like story that is sort of a through line since 2020, hardworking local officials being given what I would actually call an unfunded mandate by Congress and their state legislatures for the most part, who you are sort of the local election officials on the call, you are running elections for state legislature, governor, Senate, Congress, president, and not being sort of given enough resources by those bodies to make those elections happen. And I think overall, the story we are telling is that that needs to change. We estimate the national election infrastructure needs as being about $20 billion over 10 years. You can go to modernizeourelections.org if you want to see some of the white papers that dig into details on that calculation. But the numbers that you saw from Ben, and it's unbelievably great that the EAC has done that money so far, and I think Ben would agree with me on this, the numbers we are sort of seeing have not been enough. We've also seen a new set of restrictions on private support for election administration across the country since 2020. This is a sort of relatively new set of restrictions that swept through states rather quickly. About 28 states now have some restriction on the ability of private actors to support local election administrators. That still leaves 22 states with the same similar lack of restrictions that they have had pre-2020. In those 28 states, it's basically an incredibly complicated legal analysis to figure out what is still acceptable, generally speaking, and these are generalities. There are sort of no large, these are different statutes in different states. There's no really big conclusions we can draw across the country, but generally speaking, they ban monetary support. And so it makes it harder for nonprofits to support underfunded local election departments with money, while providing varying levels of restriction on technical support or in-kind support or the ability of experts from across the country to help sort of provide what we need. That set of restrictions, I think, is paired really importantly with a growth in organizations that do direct support for local election officials. And I think this is another important trend since 2020 that I think is worth highlighting. Organizations like the Elections Group that many of you have worked with, or Center for Civic Design, or United States Digital Response do have more staff, more money, and more capacity to support election officials with procedures and design and technology than existed in 2020 or before 2020. I think that's a really sort of positive development that pairs with some of the restrictions that I see as a negative development. And I sort of want to flag why I call these restrictions a negative development. I think it's a sort of reaction that makes it harder to get you all what you need. But secondly, of the 28 states that restricted private money for election administration, only one, if I have any Pennsylvanians in the room, only one, that was Pennsylvania, paired their restriction on private money with enough public money to make a difference in local election officials' abilities to do work. So that Pennsylvania restriction was paired with an annual $45 million state level appropriation for election administration, including election administration at the county level in Pennsylvania. Otherwise, those restrictions have come in without that public money paired. And I think that, to me, is sort of the most frustrating part of this. The last trend before I get to sort of public money and what we're doing to sort of catalyze public money is that we have seen longer term capacity building through private support for local election officials. So want to particularly flag the work of the U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence. I see Tommy here. I think I saw Fred from Greenwich in the participants list. We have some great bipartisan election officials across the country who are participating in longer term work to strengthen their departments, sort of create gold standard election departments. And that has come with funding sort of for those long-term infrastructure building needs. I'm dropping in the chat a video that the U.S. Alliance put together about grant money and what it was able to accomplish in a small county in southwestern Illinois called Macoupin. They were able to make a real estate change that they had needed to make for years using Alliance funding. And that's a great example of how this money is, I think, particularly transformative for small rural election administrators and sort of their ability to do more with less, which is, by the way, I think one of the most sort of underrated heroic acts that election administrators do every day, is the ability to take sort of sustained underfunding over time and really run some gold standard elections in that environment of underfunding. But the last thing I will say is I think we need to work together moving forward to make sure that that underfunding isn't significant. So our plan for sort of catalyzing any sort of private support for local election officials this year is working hand in hand with a strategy that requires election officials to be speaking up about the need for those public funds. So there were about 38,000 appropriation requests that went into Congress over the last few months from local election officials in support of more federal money for election administration. We at Responsive Gov have worked closely with state legislatures and have catalyzed about $400 million over the last 4 years in new state legislative funding. As many of you know better than I do, you are generally funded through local property tax revenues. And just like Congress needs to step in with higher levels of election funding, state legislatures need to step in with higher levels of election funding to meet that $20 billion over 10 years infrastructure need that election officials have. And I'm happy to sort of take any questions on that, but the one thing I sort of want to make sure to leave folks with is that everything sort of we do to provide nonprofit support is part of this strategy to get public funding in the door. And we're going to need help from election officials from all parties, urban, rural, big, small, east, west, to sort of make that happen. So thanks. Great to meet you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate it. So we have time for a couple of questions. We've got some that have been put in the Q&A function on the Zoom. So I'll follow up with a couple of those. The first we got from Mary Jo Wyatrick, I think is the proper pronunciation. She's an attorney, by the way, and I think her work is with Native American child welfare, if I remember correctly. And I would just note that the 100th year anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act is on June 2nd. And I think that's a wonderful moment to celebrate what we've done to make a more inclusive elections administration for Native voters, but also to look in the mirror and see if there are things that we can do better. I know we prioritize it in Colorado, and I encourage all states to think about, hey, how can we reach out to this particular group of people? But Mary Jo brings up, how can the various funding that we've talked about be used to help extend and improve mail ballot or absentee ballot elections? Ben, why don't I throw that to you and see if there's any special programs you know about that have been funded through the EAC HAVA funds?
Thanks, Judd. Again, one of the great things to me about the HAVA security grants is really that flexibility. And so while our grants team can help with the specifics, as Judd knows, at the end of the day, the baseline guiding principle is it a program that's designed to improve federal elections? And so, again, I think this is an area that we've seen a number of states move to more mail, certainly in the aftermath of the pandemic or during the pandemic, we saw more people move there in that direction. And I think for people looking to implement new programs and or improve the security or transparency of those programs, I think this is an area that funding could be utilized.
Yeah, in particular, something like improving your cure process. So you've got people, whenever you do a vote by mail process, you're probably going to have people who sort of fail somewhere along the line, and that ballot can't be counted. States should try to implement cure processes where you can cure that bad signature. You can add a signature where one isn't. You can add a date where one isn't. Those kinds of things that can make a ballot that otherwise can't be counted into one that can be counted. So Sam, let me throw you a question. I'll start with more of a comment, and that is, and I'm sure everybody on this screen and everybody listening will get tired of the fact that I always bring this up, but I'll take this opportunity to note that the federal government is the only government that doesn't fund elections on a routine basis. And I think personally that we should think about our ballots in terms of real estate, right? There's real estate on the ballot that the federal government doesn't pay for. And it just so happens to be the best real estate on the ballot. It's like the primo real estate on the ballot. And it seems to me to make sense that that could be the basis for a future funding model where we really do purchase that length of space, kind of like the space in a newspaper column. You know, how much is various government contributing to the ballot and thus paying for that space. Sam, what do you think? Is that a good way to think about this question?
Yep, I think that's a great way to think about this question, sort of stapled to an idea that the sort of there's real estate in all of the infrastructure that you all are putting together that like also needs to be purchased. So Minnesota, for example, just to take that sort of last question, Minnesota just passed a new policy last year that allowed for a permanent absentee list. That's great. That requires probably mailing more ballots to voters. The state stepped up with a new $1.25 million fund for counties and cities in Minnesota to implement that. The state probably needs to provide a little bit more funding in addition to the federal government, Judd, in order to sort of make that policy implementation go great. And I think like what you are sort of bringing up is a really important dynamic around funding, which is that there are officials, city and county officials across the country, Democrats, Republicans, who are being asked by the federal government to do something without paying for that thing that they're being asked to do. And that is, I think, exactly as you said, the most important dynamic we have to remember here. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't about policy. This isn't about like changing the ways we're running elections. This is about literally just, as you said, buying that real estate on the ballot, the federal government and state governments that are asking counties and cities across the country to run their elections, paying for those elections in these urban, rural, red, blue, east, west sort of jurisdictions across the country.
Yeah, and the way that I always think about it, at least this is the way it works in Colorado, and I'm pretty sure that it works this way across most states, and that is that the local community, so in our case, the counties, they ask the school board and the special districts, hey, you've got 3 issues on the ballot, you've got 4 candidates on the ballot, that's going to take this amount of space, we're going to need to print this and do that. This is how much that costs. Then they do the same thing for their county commissioners. They do the same thing for the RTD or whatever the other associated jurisdictions are. And the one entity there that doesn't contribute is the feds. Not to call out my friends Kate and Ben on the call, but you of course don't have a role in making those decisions just yet. Maybe in the future you will. All right, so let me shift to Kate. So let's say I were to pose this question to you, Kate. So let's say I want to know, I'm a local election official, what are the 2 or 3 biggest items, best items, biggest bang for my buck that I could go to my CISA official, maybe go to my elections coordinator for the region and say, I want to do these things that will help to improve the security and administration of my elections. What's my short list there?
As expected, coming from you, that is probably the most important question you could have asked, and an incredibly thoughtful one. So thank you, Dr. Choate. It's a great point, right? So what is going to give you the biggest return on investment versus a long laundry list of things I could read off to you? If you had to do 2 things, what would they be? So the first I will say is ask us to run a tabletop exercise for you. And I say that because you get so many different things in one event, and it takes some of the logistical lift off of you. So in these tabletop exercises, we can work with your team to craft scenarios that explore physical and cyber risks in a way that have you and your teams rehearse how you're going to respond. And at the same time, we highly encourage local law enforcement and other partners that you have to be part of those training exercises too. Because the reality is, as you all know, when things go wrong, it's not just going to be you there, right? It's going to be your emergency responders. And so it's a trite but true phrase. You don't want to be exchanging business cards in the middle of an emergency. How do you build those relationships in advance? And that's where I do think that tabletop exercises is like the best single point of engagement and exposure, because it's learning on the spot together, it's rehearsing incident response plans, and it's building those partnerships with those key stakeholders like law enforcement, fire departments, National Guard, your state office, all in one. So highly, highly encourage you all to encourage your state to take us up on it. If your associations want to do one, we run tabletop exercises for associations too. We were just out in Colorado in January for the Colorado Association. Like, please take us up on this stuff, because I think that that truly is the best way to help us help you cover down on the most areas. So Jed, I'll even just say that if you do nothing else, please encourage your state association or your state, or honestly, if just a group of you got together, reach out to your local CISA rep and say, I want a TTX before November. And then have us help come out and put one together. The second thing I'd say is, depending on if you're more concerned about cyber or physical, have one of our field staff come out to your office and do an assessment. Because we'll talk through things, we'll help war game with you and troubleshoot for what those low to no cost solutions could be between now and November, while we keep our eye on the goalpost for future infrastructure improvements. So
Love it. That's fantastic. I'll just throw out another one that pops into my head. Join the ISAC. If you are not a member of the EI ISAC, please join. It's really easy. All you got to do, go to Google, put in elections ISAC, and it'll take you straight to the join page. You'll get a bunch of great information about election security, cybersecurity related things, and it'll get you involved in this larger community of election security administration. So that would be a great tip as well.
if I could use that opening, because I feel like this could be my third without getting really a third, absolutely join the EI ISAC. So I dropped in the chat the link to our Protect 2024 page. You'll see we actually thought about the same exact question, where we were like, if we asked election officials to do nothing else between now and the end of October, what would those be? So we call it the first things first. Joining the EI ISAC is one of those 6 things that we encourage election officials to do. If you join the EI ISAC, so CISA funds a large percentage of the EI ISAC through a cooperative agreement. One of the things that we also fund, beyond just being a member of the EI ISAC and getting that threat intel sharing, you can also sign up for free cybersecurity services that we are paying for through the EI ISAC that you can leverage. So when we talked about before, things like endpoint detection and response software, CISA is funding free licenses for EI ISAC members to use at the state and local level. They're specific to those supporting election infrastructure, or what we call target-rich, cyber resource challenged types of election offices, right? But really, this is one of those things where it's free as long as you're a member. And again, you're getting top-level commercial solutions to help you defend these things.
Yeah, fantastic. If you're just Googling, Google Elections ISAC, and that's a great way to sign up. And as Kate alludes to, it opens you up to all these other opportunities that you can learn about and take advantage of. All right. Thank you so much, Kate Conley, Ben Hovland, Sam Oliker-Friedland. Really great information. I appreciate it. And thanks so much for joining us today. They are also very busy, so it's great to have them join us. Okay, I am going to hand it to Lee Chittenden from the CEA program at the University of Minnesota, and she is going to sign us out.
All right, can you see my screen there?
Yeah, sure
Great.
can.
All right, thanks, Judd, and thank you to our panelists. Great conversations today. I really appreciate you all joining us. Before we go, I just wanted to give you all a little bit more information about our Certificate in Election Administration program. So let's see here. We've got, it's an online program here at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School. It began in 2017. Our mission is to expand the professional expertise in the field of elections and really prepare the next generation and create a pipeline of new election administrators. Our curriculum covers the fundamental building blocks of elections, as well as sort of digging into those broader tensions and issues facing our election systems. Our students come away with sort of critical thinking skills to navigate those challenges and opportunities, as well as knowledge of best practices. Again, the program is fully online, very accessible, designed for working professionals. We offer it at both the undergraduate and graduate level, and you can start the program in the fall, summer, or spring terms. We have an amazing faculty, folks like Judd Choate, Jennifer Morrell, who you've heard about a lot today, Tammy Patrick, and others. Great practitioners, super knowledgeable, and really well versed in the field and great to work with. And they are also very eager to connect with our students and help you connect with others in the field. There are two ways for you to participate in the program. You can apply to the full program through an application. We have our application for fall is open right now. It's due August 15th, and then the semester starts the first week of September. Or you can also try out a course, just low barrier, try it out, see if you like it. And that's taking a course as a non-degree seeking student. And then if you enjoy it, you can sort of apply and then move into the program from there. So it's a nice opportunity for just trying it all out. The application is very simple, very straightforward application form one for undergrad, one for graduate level, a resume, and a pretty straightforward personal statement. So it's pretty basic. We've got our links there to our graduate and undergraduate application. We're also very excited to announce that we do have some CEA specific scholarships that we will be offering for the first time this fall. We have two scholarships. One we're calling the Professional Development Scholarship, which will be focused for current election officials and professionals. And then we have an Emerging Leaders one that will be for folks newer and entering the field. These are partial scholarships, so they'll cover part of the tuition, and they are based on sort of a combination of merit and need. There's an application. It'll be open on our website on June 10th. They are due by August 1st, and you can contact us for some more information about that. So that's pretty exciting. First time we've done that. You also have an opportunity to take a course this summer. We have two great offerings starting on June 3rd, Strategic Management of Election Administration, course really explores of the political and strategic challenges of administering elections. That'll be taught by Catherine Pearson, a professor of political science here at the University of Minnesota. And then we also have Introduction to Election Security, taught by Jennifer Morrell of the elections group. And this examines some of the history of cyber attacks on the US elections and explores some of the threats and strategies to protect against them. So those are both great courses. You can still enroll. They start in about 2 weeks, and you can reach out to us for more information on how to get registered for those. If you have more questions about the program, we would love you to join us at one of our info sessions. We hold these regularly. It's an opportunity for you to meet with our staff, ask questions, get more detailed, specific information for your situation. We have a few coming up, as you can see there. So feel free to join us, and there's a way to register online. And lastly, again, we will be posting this recording along with presentations on our website in about a day or so. And here's our contact information for the program, our webpage, and also our email. Please reach out and get in touch with us. We love to hear from you. And again, thank you all for joining us. It was a great conversation. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.